So this little three-piece I've put together after injuring my own hip. So when we get an injury, the brain and the body downregulate signals to muscles around a joint to minimize the range of motion so that it can heal, because the more that we aggravate it, the less it can heal. But that comes obviously with a problem when we start to return to what we want to do, because we need the bigger ranges of motion in order to do harder and harder tasks. So what we're going to do here is focusing on opening up safe ranges in the hip, which might have gone missing from injury, or if we need to build them up. Say for example, for kicking, this is a beautiful combination of movements which are going to open up the hips, ready for kicking. So this one we're wanting to do between 2 and 3 sets. We'll do 10 reps of each, and it's all just to get the hips back to moving sideways and back to rotating internally properly and functioning as we want them to. For the first one, what we're going to do is we're going to stand with one leg out, and then we're going to take the knee onto this box, onto the pad. It's better to use a pad just to keep the knee comfortable. And then all we're going to do is, this is almost like the knee bar that we get in Thai when we hold on to the neck, but we're going to simulate this to push the hip open. We're going to try and keep the chest as high as possible and really work this joint to open up. The bottom leg is just going to assist to sink in. So all I'm going to do is take a nasal inhale down, try and open up the hip a little, keeping the torso as high as possible. And then I push back out, but with this. So I'm pushing the knee into the bench, making the hip do the work to come out, not the standing leg. And that's going to start to open up the hip. But what you'll also notice is, if we're turning this standing leg out and driving the knee out, we also start to get some stability in this hip too. So that's the way we're going to do that, just to try and open up. We're going to do both sides, and we can do these 3 movements in a circuit so that you go one after the other and run back through. It's worth noting as well that if you have had an injured side, it's going to be worse than the good side. So expect side to side differences and just go with them, train them both individually, because then they can both get better at their own pace. Remember, we want about 10 reps on each side. What you'll also notice is I'm trying to keep the hips forward. I'm trying not to sink them back. I'm trying to stay tall. I'm trying to keep my torso as high as I can, but respecting any sort of feeling I'm getting from the hip to say that's too much. And that's the first exercise. Now on to the second. So for this one, we're going to take that similar stance, but what I'm going to do is put the side of the foot onto the box, and then get this foot set. And what I'm trying to do is stay as high as possible and lift that leg sideways. So we're really isolating the muscles in the hip which pull out to the side, and this is really working them hard at end range. We're going to do a short pulse up to pull the foot off the bench with the hip muscles, and then we're going to put it back down for 10 reps. And as you'll see, it's quite hard to keep your balance on this, so it's also going to help the balance of being on one foot whilst you're lifting the other leg. So they're just like little pulses. You'll feel it in the outside of the hip, but you'll also feel it in the muscles that connect into the hip from the top. So it'll be like either the obliques on the side, or you can get some QL, which is a muscle on the back which stabilizes the hip. So you can get both of those whilst you're doing this, but like I say, we're looking for that stability as we lift as much as possible. So find the foot placement which allows you to do it with the most control. If you struggle with a box at this height, all you've got to do is take the box lower, or if you find it easy, you can bring the box higher to do those lift-offs to really isolate the hip. And I shall just do the other side to even out. And that's one set done. Now for the last movement. Ooh. So for this last one, we're going to come down to the floor and lay on our sides with the medicine ball. It doesn't really matter what weight the medicine ball is. I'm going to then roll that in between my knees, and this is to bring back the internal rotation that we often lose with injuries. What we're going to do is have the hips at about a 90-degree angle, and then all I'm doing with this top foot is rotating it in, holding for a second, and then relaxing. It's teaching the hip to internally rotate safely again. And I can feel this as I go in this hip here, so I can feel it in the oblique, I can feel it in the lower abs, and I can feel it in the psoas. Again, we're going for about 10 reps each side, so that's 8. And then I'm going to switch sides. So this is my previously injured side, so this one's going to be a little worse than the right hand side. But this exercise is helping to bring that function back to the hip. So if we can get this in, 2-3 sets of each exercise as a circuit, 3 times a week, we're going to start to improve that hip function again. Just something to be wary of. If you do feel a pinch or any pain on any of these movements, it just means we've gone too far and we just need to scale them down a little. That's the only thing we need to be careful of on these.